Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel Arunodayam Creations. Today we are going to learn about pathway of air in our video. Pathway of air, this is our respiratory system which contains so many organs responsible for breathing. So first step in case of respiration is breathing. We all know that we have 5 steps in respiration. First step, breathing takes place in this respiratory tract. So first what happens? The air from outside enters into our nose through 2 openings in the nose called as nostrils or external nares. So from these external nares or nostrils, the air enters into a cavity called as nasal cavity. Our nasal cavity has hair which is useful for removing tiny particles and dirt materials from the air. That means it is useful for purification of air. Next, the nasal cavity contains nasal septum which is useful for dividing the nasal cavity into 2 compartments. Okay, 2 compartments. So the nasal septum will divide the nasal cavity into 2 compartments. Next, nasal cavity contains mucous membrane which produces a sticky substance called mucus. This mucus is useful for filtering the air along with hair, and this mucus is also useful for bringing the temperature of air close to our body temperature, and it is also useful for humidifying the air. So all this process takes place in nasal cavity and continues in pharynx also. Pharynx is common chamber for both air and food. So here, after the air enters into pharynx, this muscular flap-like structure called as epiglottis opens and allows the air to pass into trachea. Okay, so before entering into trachea, first the air enters into this sound box called as larynx. This larynx has 2 plate-like structures called vocal cords. When air rushes out of the lungs, these 2 vocal cords vibrates and produces a sound. Okay, that's why it is also called as sound box. So from this larynx, the air enters into this tube called as trachea, which is also called as windpipe. So this trachea is covered with a C-shaped cartilaginous rings which are useful for protecting the trachea from damage. So during a cough or during sneezing, air rushes out of our lungs through this trachea. So during this process, some damage or some rupture might happen to the wall of trachea. So in order to prevent or in order to protect the trachea from damages, these C-shaped cartilaginous rings are present on them. So after that, the air enters into these 2 branches of trachea called as bronchi, and from these bronchi will enter into 2 lungs. And after entering into lungs, these bronchi will divide into bronchioles, still more small branches called as bronchioles, and from these bronchioles the air enters into small airbag-like structures present in the lungs called as alveoli. So lungs are made up of millions and millions of cluster of air sacs called as alveoli. So from these bronchioles the air enter into alveoli. We know that each alveoli is covered with a blood capillary which contains blood in them. Here, diffusion of gases takes place between alveolus and blood capillaries. The air which is present in alveolus has more amount of oxygen than the oxygen present in blood. Okay, so what happens here? Diffusion takes place. Oxygen moves from higher concentration to lower concentration. That means from alveolus to blood capillary. And carbon dioxide which is present in the blood capillary is more when compared to the carbon dioxide present in the air in alveoli. So here also diffusion takes place. Carbon dioxide from blood capillary enters into alveolus through diffusion process. Again, the air with carbon dioxide will take its journey back. The air with carbon dioxide moves from alveolus to alveolus, lungs, both are same. Alveolus to bronchioles, bronchioles to bronchus, bronchus to trachea, trachea to larynx, larynx through the epiglottis enters into pharynx, and from there to nasal cavity, and it comes out through nostril during our breathe out process. So this is the pathway of air, and during this whole passage from nostrils to alveolus, the air is moist and warm in nature. Okay. Thank you for watching.